I have no bottom eyelashes on this side. This is so sad. Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Crue Trime. Crue Trime. Crue Trime. If you are new here, hi. My name is Sarah, and what I do here is tell you a terrible story to ruin your day. And I put on my makeup at the same time. So if that sounds like fun to you, you are in the right place. So do all the YouTubey things so that you don't ever miss a story. All right, friends, seatbelts on, crystals out. And if anybody brought along a Chanel bag for cleansing, hold it close. Because today we are diving into a good old-fashioned scam. And not just any kind of scam, my favorite kind, psychic scams. So one of the earliest stories that I covered on this channel was Sylvia Browne. The comments on that video continue to be insane to this day. The people love Sylvia Browne for some reason. If you love psychic mediums and all that jazz, I love that for you. But you know what? I'm not here to roast belief systems, okay? I'm here to roast scammers. But today's smoke is reserved for people who turn other people's grief and vulnerability into an invoice. This is the story of Gina Marie Marks. So, picture it. The Miami International Airport, 2017. A woman wearing the most fabulous oversized sunnies hustles towards a flight to Barcelona, clutching a passport and, allegedly, the receipts for other people's bad energy. Surprise! The police stepped in with the kind of aura that you can't sage away. So the woman did not end up boarding the plane. She ended up boarding the justice system. And that woman was Gina Marie Marks. Who was Gina Marks? I'm glad you asked. Gina Marie Marks was born on January 25th, 1973 to a pretty prominent American Romney family. Her father was very successful in business within the Romney community, and her mother, Betty Jo Ingram, ran a small fortune-telling shop. It was tucked between pawn shops and nail salons on some sun-bleached strip of Miami real estate. It was the kind of place with a faded palm readings $10 sign in the window and a mysterious red curtain that hid the mystical back room. If you've ever driven past one of these places and thought, who actually goes in there? The answer is people like me, people like you. Anybody who's ever been desperate enough to believe that fate, love, illness, luck in life, could be improved. So Gina grew up watching her mom reading people's palms and tarot cards, picking up on every trick. Body language mirroring, slow nodding, and vague statements that could apply to most anyone. By the time Gina was a teenager, she didn't just know how to read a person, she could read a room. Clients would later describe Gina's presence as mesmerizing. She was soft-spoken, disarming, with just enough theatrical flair to make you forget logic. She would dim the lights, burn incense, and start the reading by asking open-ended questions that she would later repeat back as revelations. The official origin story, the one that she would later tell journalists, publishers, and victims, was a lot more dramatic. She said that when she was 12 years old, she almost drowned, and according to her, she saw the light. She felt herself crossing over, and then she returned, touched by the other side. Now, I'm not saying that she didn't have this near-death experience, but I am saying that if most people came back from the brink of death, they'd maybe journal about gratitude, not start charging $500 for aura detoxes. That near drowning became her spiritual branding. Ever since that day, she would say, I've had a gift. And technically, she wasn't wrong. She did have a gift. It just wasn't psychic, it was salesmanship. So by the time she had reached adulthood, she turned that gift into a full-time business, the family business. She opened up her first reading room in Fort Lauderdale, catering to lonely hearts, mostly women, newly divorced, unlucky in love, anybody whose life had recently fallen apart in a way that made them vulnerable to mystical solutions. If a client told her, I've been struggling with a man, she would reply, yes, I see a man causing you pain. If the client said, my mother passed away, Gina would sigh and say, she's here with us. I mean, that's cold reading 101. But when you're grieving or desperate, it feels like divine intervention. So by the late 1990s, Gina Marie Marks had officially upgraded from a kid who reads palms for lunch money to a professional psychic entrepreneur. You know, a phrase that should have set off every smoke alarm in Miami. But she'd built a tidy empire of psychic storefronts up and down Florida's Gold Coast. You know, the usual mix of incense, candles, and furniture that looks like it came from a Dracula-themed Pier 1 Imports.
I would like some of that colorful dust that sparkles.
Glitter?
Yes.
Gina's specialty was romantic crisis, you know, because heartbreak is a gold mine for con artists. She would tell women that their boyfriend's bad behavior wasn't their fault, it was a curse. Depression, also a curse. Credit card debt, curse. But don't worry, Gina could help remove that curse, you know, for a fee. So pretty much every problem, you know, money issues, family drama, chronic bad luck, would be traced back to this invisible curse. She told clients that the cleansing required energy transfers, which sounds kind of like a yoga workshop, but actually just a wallet extraction ritual. Crack myself up. Depending on the client's financial status, the curse's intensity conveniently scaled up. If it was a broke college student, Gina's services would just, you know, take $50-$60. But if it was a suburban mom with a Range Rover, I mean, that would be a generational curse. And we're talking gold chains, diamonds, designer handbags, and cash bundles that would be required for them to provide for Gina to remove this negative energy. She would take these clients' valuables, and I mean like literally she would say, bring me your physical money or your luxury goods. And then she would promise to cleanse it with like a special spiritual ritual. And Gina would promise to take the money, cleanse it, and then return it, you know, once it was spiritually neutral, or whatever the term is. So she would conduct these elaborate rituals, right? Candles, bowls of salt, fake chanting, maybe like a rose dipped in oil, just like whatever, Google it. Google mystical ritual. She would do whatever that is. It's like she was auditioning for like Real Housewives of Spiritual Realm.
Oh yes, I say Holy Ghost fire on me and Peter and thunderstorm, amen. There's no witchcraft there.
So she would do these rituals, and then if and when the client would return, she would sense more darkness and they would have to continue this. Now, if a client would be hesitant to follow Gina's advice, she would warn them. Okay, well, but I can't guarantee your safety if we stop now. Or she would say, there's something watching you, or if you walk away, I can't protect your family. She convinced one client that stopping these treatments would cause her husband to die in a car crash. She told another client that her unborn baby would be born cursed forever if she didn't complete this ritual plan. And you know what? These threats worked. Remember, these people were desperate. These clients would mortgage their homes, empty their savings accounts. They would go into debt just to stay in Gina's good graces. And Gina applied these same risks in regards to the clients speaking about this work to anyone. She pretty much said, like, if you talk about the work that we're doing here, it will fail. So Gina would tell these clients to bring in all the cash money that they had, because money is the root of all evil, and in order to, you know, lift the curse that had befallen them, the actual money needed to be cleansed of this dark energy and evil spirits. Okay, so she would physically take the money or the valuables,
money please,
do some ritualistic things to it, and then she said that she would take it to the altar of her church to pray over it, and then she would return it once the curse was lifted. And she would say that these practices were deep-rooted in her culture of ancient Romani tradition, and that outsiders just like don't understand this sacred art of removing curses. The money or the jewelry or the valuables would never be returned. This was essentially just like cash changing hands, and it's difficult for police to prove anything. There's not receipts, and the people would be too embarrassed, to go to the police. They thought the police wouldn't believe them or think they were stupid or crazy, whatever. So Gina was getting away with a lot, literally. Meanwhile, Gina had also learned how to reinvent herself. So whenever the shop got too much heat, too many customers asking too many questions, she would close it and then reopen it with a new name, sometimes in another town, sometimes with another alias. Gina Marie Marks was also Regina Milburn or Natalie Miller or Regina Marks. Each persona just slightly tweaked for a fresh start. Every new identity came with a fresh backstory. She was new to town, had been trained in the mountains, she was spiritually guided by her grandmother, just like all the things. So to outsiders, she looked like a woman with a divine gift and an expensive wardrobe. But to cops and con watchers, she was definitely part of a larger tradition, the psychic fraud industry. It's a shadowy network of mostly family-run storefronts that pull in millions annually through emotional manipulation and these curse removal scams. So fast forward to the early 2000s, Gina was not some back alley fortune teller. She was the queen bee of South Florida's psychic scene, complete with designer purses, multiple million-dollar properties, and a reputation among locals as the one the rich people go to. Gina wasn't chasing these $50 broke college student readings anymore. She was chasing whales, the emotionally devastated but financially stable. She quickly learned that rich clients don't blink at big numbers if you wrapped the con in enough spiritual nonsense. She would charge like $25,000 for an energy transfer or a love block removal. She promised that she could restore marriages, heal cancer, or contact the dead. And one victim, according to court records, gave her over $65,000 in a single soul cleansing operation. Now remember, this psychic grift wasn't just, Gina's solo act. This was a family business. Her mother, sister, and other relatives ran similar operations across Florida, sometimes swapping storefronts like shift workers. When one store got busted, another one would step in. And the victims would learn that their new advisor was like Gina's cousin. And this very tight-knit network made it even harder for law enforcement to pin her down. So each storefront was technically independent, and the victims were not in a rush to report what happened to them. But eventually a pattern did emerge. This predictable choreography of emotional manipulation, financial exploitation, and convenient vanishing acts. Now here's where it gets especially audacious.
Who is this lady you have shrunk? Was she the owner of this house that you camp in front of?
While Gina was still running scams and dodging probation, she started pitching a memoir.
These are your spells?
No, there's a good one. The Millionaire Mindset.
Enter Miami Psychic, Confessions of a Confidant to the Rich and Infamous. It was published in 2006 by Reagan Books, an imprint of HarperCollins. The cover of the book just screams like sexy danger, and the author was Regina Milburn, which we know is one of her aliases. So the book just glamorized everything. She wrote that she was a reluctant medium who was drawn into the criminal underworld, advising drug lords and cops alike. Quote, with only a 6th grade education, Regina Milburn has become Miami's sought-after psychic. Her clients include police officers, politicians, drug dealers, and pedophiles. She's seen it all, murder, betrayal, and the power of the spirit world that drives the city's dark heart. So in the book, she's like the confessor and the redeemer, but if you read between the lines, it's not a redemption arc. It's a brag sheet. She literally outlines her methods. Secrecy, emotional control, energetic transfers, and in one chapter she wrote, quote, I take on the darkness of my clients so they can live in the light. All right, Gina, but you also took on their Rolexes.
Do not try shrink me. I serious.
So when Miami Psychic hit the shelves, HarperCollins hyped it as like a real-life supernatural memoir. Part The Sopranos, part medium. She did press interviews under this Regina Milburn persona. You know, dark lipstick, mysterious smiles, the whole I see dead people, but I also need a stylist. She told journalists that she was a confidant to criminals, that her sessions were a form of spiritual therapy for Miami's underworld. What she didn't mention was that several of those clients were already suing her for fraud. Reporters in South Florida started whispering that Regina looked mysteriously like Gina Marks, and at that point, she was already becoming known to be, you know, a fraud. Here's the best part. So Gina actually released that book while she was on probation for a 2005 grand theft case.
Wow.
So the book sold, but not like millions of copies, but enough to keep her ego going and her scams rolling. At her peak, Gina was really living the good life. You know, she was wearing designer clothes, she had designer handbags and jewelry, you know, luxury cars, high-end real estate. She wasn't just cleansing people's energy, she was, you know, laundering their hope. She played both sides, spiritual healer to her clients, glamorous mystic to her publishers, and misunderstood cultural figure to the media. But in every persona, she centered herself as the martyr, you know, this woman who just was misunderstood. The irony is that she wasn't entirely wrong. By the time the law did understand her, she had already conned her way through a decade of fake names, book deals, and probation violations. But that was much later, and we'll get to that. Back to the book. The publishing house, HarperCollins, began receiving some complaints, I guess, from people who recognized the stories in this memoir a little too well. A few of them even claimed that she had used their sessions as material, you know, fictionalized just enough to avoid lawsuits. It became clear that these real-life psychic confessions were less divine revelation and more creative nonfiction with criminal undertones. By 2007, Gina's reputation was unraveling faster than a knockoff Hermes scarf. She got hit with new fraud charges, her probation was extended, and by 2009, she was back in court. Now, every great scam artist eventually meets the one person who's not buying their shit. Enter Bob Nygaard, the psychic industry's worst nightmare and the world's most patient man. Former Detective Bob Nygaard wasn't your average beat cop. He'd spent 20 years as a New York City police officer. He was chasing everything from street hustlers in the subway to, you know, organized fraudsters. After retiring and moving on down to Boca Raton, Florida, he became a private investigator and he decided to make it his personal mission to take down these con artists. So Bob had actually noticed something that nobody else was really paying attention to. These psychic scams weren't quirky side hustles. They were tremendously organized, multi-generational criminal enterprises. Entire families were making fortunes off of vulnerable people, hiding behind claims of Romany cultural traditions to dodge prosecution. As it happened, Bob was out for like happy hour at the local watering hole, and he started chatting up a couple of local ladies. They worked in the hospital nearby, and, you know, Bob worked as a private investigator, so they were just chatting about their work and how interesting it was and blah, blah, blah. You know, very interesting conversation. Now, as the ladies left the bar, Bob gave his business card, and one of the ladies actually called him within minutes. She said she had been scammed by a fake psychic. She explained that she had been having kind of a rough time in her personal life, and she thought the psychic could help her feel better or, you know, give her some advice somehow. But all told, that psychic took her for like $12,000, and she was too embarrassed to go to the police about it. Bob was all in. So once he dug into the case, he realized that Gina Marie Marks was one of the most prolific psychic scammers he had ever come across. And she was from a notorious American Romany family. He called her the Houdini of hustlers, because every time he would get close, she vanished. Gina really knew how to game the system. She would claim that she was being culturally prosecuted, you know, racially profiled. And she would lean on these sympathetic judges who didn't understand these psychic fraud cases. But Nygaard had time. He built a cross-state case that looked like a con artist family tree. Each alias had matching bank accounts, P.O. boxes, and rental cars. He gathered statements from victims who were too embarrassed to go to the authorities and file reports, convincing them that shame didn't erase crime. Bob eventually presented the case to the Broward County Police Department, but they didn't agree that it was strong enough to issue a warrant. It took a while and some back and forth and a little bit more bolstering up of the case before he finally got them to agree. But when the police finally finally showed up at Gina's doorstep, she was gone. So now Gina Marie Marks is on the run. The story is all over the local news. And Gina's lawyer actually provided a statement, that his client was planning to turn herself in after the Christmas holidays. She was not evading the police. Okay, well, you're being pursued and then you're hiding out. That's what that is. But anyways, so basically Gina was a mother of 3 and she didn't want to ruin their Christmas holidays. So she did actually turn herself in after Christmas. Well, Gina's goose was cooked. She pled no contest to the theft and fraud charges. Gina was ordered to pay back the $65,000 and was, issued probation. She was banned from providing psychic services while serving on probation, and a violation of those terms would send her right to jail.
Believe it or not, jail, right away.
Fast forward 2 years later, Bob learned that Gina was back up to her old tricks. She was actually scamming another family for upwards of $500,000, a clear probation violation. So he went straight to the Broward County Police Department and an arrest warrant was issued. And at Gina's court hearing, the judge ordered her to repay that $500,000 that she had swindled away and to serve 18 months in prison. While Gina went off to prison to serve her time, Bob's phone was ringing off the hook from other psychic fraud victims who found out that he was actually successful in taking down one of these people. There was hope for them. So Bob to move on, chasing down other psychic frauds, getting them, justice for the victims and all this stuff. He was very busy. So fast forward again to 2017. Gina had served her time and moved on with her life, and Bob was busy being the nation's premier psychic hunter. So he got a phone call from a person in Maryland who had been scammed for a large sum of money. Long story short, guess who the psychic scammer was? Oh yeah, it was Gina. Although at this time, she wasn't going by Gina, she was going by Natalie Miller. So little side note, and this was interesting to me. So since Bob is a private investigator, the rules of jurisdiction don't really apply to him. He could chase Gina or whoever anywhere and everywhere. But what he can't do is arrest. He would have to work with the local police to work that out. So a tip from one of Bob's sources cracked the Gina case back open again. She was back in Miami running yet another psychic healing business, but she was planning a quick flight to Barcelona. When Miami-Dade police stopped her at the airport, she was allegedly carrying stacks of cash, a fake ID, and the smug energy of somebody who thought the TSA doesn't check for karma. So Bob Nygaard's decade-long investigation had paid off. His file, hundreds of pages thick, connected her 2005, 2007, 2009, 2010, and 2014 fraud cases directly to this 2017 arrest. It was the kind of organized fraud map that prosecutors dream of. By 2018, Nygaard's work helped secure Gina's plea agreement for defrauding 5 victims out of more than $340,000. When the story broke, the headlines practically wrote themselves. Psychic didn't see the prison coming. Miami medium gets a reading from a judge. The public loved it. True crime junkies, ate it up. Gina doubled down, saying that she didn't scam anyone. The people are racist against her Romani heritage and she has psychic powers, but she's not allowed to talk about it.
Sure, Jan.
So after nearly 15 years of spiritual counseling that looked suspiciously like grand theft, because it was, the state finally had enough. Prosecutors stacked the charges. Organized fraud, grand theft on multiple counts, and probation violations. Each one of the victims had come forward independently, and when detectives compared the notes, it was like deja vu. Same candles, the same curse, the same excuses, and the same Gucci purse collection in Gina's closet. Gina's attorney, who I can only imagine is paid in haunted jewelry, went for this spiritual tradition misunderstood by outsiders defense. He argued that Gina was being persecuted because of her Romani heritage and that her spiritual practices were culturally legitimate, not criminal. In the courtroom, Gina actually stood up perfectly composed and delivered a monologue. She said, "They're racist on my culture. We do have power. It's not a crime to help people." She wasn't trembling. She wasn't crying. She was furious. The judge let her talk for a full minute before calmly replying, "Ms. Marks, this isn't about culture, it's about stealing." Boom, gavel, instant enlightenment.
Get her, Jade.
Gina was sentenced to 6 years in prison. Full restitution, now $340,000, had to be repaid, probation to follow, and in prison, Gina reportedly tried to reinvent herself once again. She told other inmates that she'd been framed by the system, that her psychic gifts were just too strong for the world. So after serving her time and going back to society, Gina Marie Marks did not hang up her tarot card deck. Oh no! She flipped the script, she moved states again, upgraded her wardrobe again, and renamed the hustle. Fast forward again to late 2022. 52-year-old Gina set up the business along 40-year-old partner Stephen Nicholas, the Jenkintown Psychic Visions business in Jenkintown, Pennsylvania. It was the same playbook: phone readings, declarations of curses, demands for cleansing rituals. The first victim contacted them for a phone reading, and Gina and Steve told her that she was plagued by a powerful curse preventing her from finding love and happiness. They warned that the curse would destroy her marriage, business, and family if not removed. So over the next 11 months, they allegedly extracted $595,000 from that victim in cash, jewelry, clothing, concert tickets, gift cards, everything wrapped in ritual packaging and never returned. And threatened like reputational damage or personal repercussions if the instructions weren't followed. Apparently, the curse that Gina could not remove was hubris. Setting up shop in a new state with a partner this time? That's not an evolution, it's a rerun. The only thing that upgraded was the prices. The method was the same, the victims vulnerable, the energy absolutely illegal. Well, on October 7th, 2025, Gina and her accomplice Steve were both arrested in Montgomery County, Pennsylvania, and held on bond. Their preliminary hearing was scheduled for October 20th, but I couldn't find any updates, so I think it was continued, ? The authorities released a statement that read, quote, "These defendants preyed on people who were looking for help, guidance, and hope, exploiting them for financial gain. Gina Marie Marks didn't learn from her past. She just repackaged it. The cosmos might forgive, but the court doesn't. And now she's back in front of the system again. Like, how many times? How many times can this continue happening? So we'll see how that works out for her pretty soon. And that is the story of Gina Marie Marks. That one, I have to say, was exhausting. I don't know that I've ever heard of somebody repeating the same shit over and over and over. Like, she sincerely thinks that she's not committing crimes. You're committing crimes, girl. If you want to know any of the makeup that I used in today's look, then look down in the description box because everything is linked. If there's a Crue Trime story that you would like to recommend to me, also down in the description box is a link to a Google Doc where you can click on it. It will take you there so you can fill in all the dirty details. I would love to hear from you. Thank you so much for hanging out today and for watching this video. I really appreciate it. If you want to see more videos like this one, then consider subscribing to this channel before you leave today. I upload new videos here on YouTube every week, and you can follow me on most of the other socials as well. That is it for now. I will catch you next time in the next video. Bye! They're fucking Jesus. All the dirty details. Gina Marie... I have no bottom eyelashes on this side. This is so sad. What? Memory pound. Blah, 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 blah. Yoga workshop.